Hello everybody, it's your backers E.V.A here, and this video has been one I've been wanting to make for a while. The concept actually comes from another channel called GinjaNinja OWO, who made two videos where they took their magical girl characters and designed them as if they were in other magical girl shows. I thought this was a really fun idea since I have some magical girl adjacent characters of my own, which I just talked about last week, and I thought I'd give it a try. I did originally forget about this though since I put it off for a while, but we're finally here. I'll be redesigning the main cast of Moonstone as if they were from not just magical girl shows, but shows and series that have inspired me to create this story, and also stories that are also kind of similar to this genre-wise, I guess. So with that, let's get started. The first series I redesigned them in was Sailor Moon. I talked about this in my last video and the first video talking about them, but the series did start off as a, I will say, very Sailor Moon inspired story, with Rosa as the main character, so it felt right to start them off here. When people think about the Sailor Scouts, you would probably think about the main cast and how they look, but there's actually a lot more Sailor Scouts than that, with a lot of them having different designs for each group. So for this group, I decided to change it up from the main cast, since I would imagine that they would come from a different world, much like the Star Darlings and the Annie something. I forgot what they're called, but they're like the evil Sailor Moon group from the last arc of the Sailor Moon manga, which is I've only read the manga. I've never read it nor watched the anime, so I don't know if they're in that, but they're the evil animal-based magical girls from the last arc in the manga. But of course, have it be similar enough where it's still obviously Sailor Moon. So instead of white for their tops, they'll have lighter versions of their main colors, different sleeves and shoes, and of course some sheer overcoats, because you can't stop me from giving them sheer stuff. It's obligatory. For River, I stuck with blue as their main, of course, with yellow as their accents, and since each Sailor Scout gets an accent color. I made their brooch a crescent moon, and instead of a skirt, I gave them some shorts, just because. I don't know if that would be canonical in the Sailor Moon universe. I know that the only other gender fluid character does wear a skirt too, but I just thought it suited River more, and plus they are from a different solar system, so that's my excuse. I gave them some long gloves and boots, and instead of gold for their tiara, I made it silver, which I did for the rest of the scouts as well. For Rosa, I stuck with pink as her main color and purple as her accent. I made her overcoat, overdress thing a lot more long and ornate, and I also gave her gloves and made them a lot shorter. Can you tell I don't have much to say about these designs? Well, anyway, I would imagine that the Sailor Gems come to Earth to help get help from the main girl, since the world is being attacked by something, and since their powers are connected, Sailor Moon and Sailor Moonstone, of course, I'm not creative. They would be able to work together or something. Anyway, for Gia, I used green for her main color and blue for her accent. Instead of gloves, she gets bracelets. Being the youngest of the scouts, she's still learning to control her powers, but she does enjoy fighting alongside them and helping out as best as she can. And now I wanted to include Nick and Chase as well, so I had a fun idea for Nick to make him the prince of the world that the gang come from. And so I looked up designs of both Indium, I don't know how to say his name, the Tuxedo Mask, and some of the villains from the first arc, as they all have the princely look to them. I will say that mine doesn't look as much like them, but maybe that's okay since he comes from a different world from them anyway. That's basically my main excuse for all of the design choices here. I also stuck with his original colors, which did give him a bit of a desaturated look, which I actually fixed with everyone at the end to give them a more 90s aesthetic to brighten up the colors. And for Chase, I had a fun idea to make him a cat, much like Luna and Artemis. I decided to do this since he has a pretty similar personality as Luna and also a pretty similar role, so I thought that would fit for him. He would probably have a human form and come from the same world that Luna and Artemis come from too, and I made his fur pattern match his vitiligo spots, and instead of a moon crescent on his forehead, gave him a diamond one, just like Nyx's diamond crown. That's kind of everyone's main symbol here, is that diamond shape, because gemstones, get. So you have Sailor Moonstone, Sailor Rose Quartz, and Sailor. Eventually, and you just have Nick and Chase as well. I don't know if Chase would have a different name. Luna and Artemis are very lunar names, and they work with their princess of the moon, so maybe his name would be different and be something gem based to match the prince that he works for. And after increasing everyone's saturation, adding some grain and a background, this one was complete. Although these were some of the simplest designs, I quite like how they turned out, and I think the gang could fit well into this world. Now, since the main concept of this story revolves around gemstones, it seems fitting to put them into a show that also involves gemstones and gem people. That's right, the next show I put them in was Land of the Lustrous. You can't stop me from talking about this show. I love this anime so much. Please go watch it. Please go watch it and then go read the manga and be sad like the rest of us. I was so excited to draw everyone as gemstones, and it was quite easy deciding what gem everyone was going to be, so let's go ahead and talk about the designs. For everyone, I decided to go with their transformed hair, and because almost everyone has a gradient in their hair, this ended up looking really cool with the shading technique I used, which you might already notice is pretty different from my normal style. I developed this style to be more close to the style of the anime, so minimal shading on the clothes and skin, and extra work in the hair and eyes using a diamond-shaped brush to give it a gemstone look. I've talked about this lots in other past Land of the Lustrous videos I've done, where I drew a lot of the gems, and I also drew yellow diamond in my color wheel thing, and this one is pretty much like that, the way I shaded these guys here, but it's a lot more simple. Now, because of this, these did take quite a bit longer than most of the designs, but the designs themselves were quite simple. It was really all just the rendering that made these take a while. I gave Moonstone one of the standard school uniforms and a sword, and I wanted to talk a bit about everyone's roles as well. In the show, everyone's strength is based on where they lie on the hardness scale, and Moonstone is actually only a 6 in strength. This might mean that they have a different job instead, such as helping to gather materials or maybe helping in the library. I would also imagine that Moonstone would have a fascination with the moon, and that would be what it could be hiding other than the Lunarians. So they do some studying at night. So maybe they run into a cinnabar a couple times. I don't know. However, they can fight if they have to, and they are pretty good, but a little stiff at times. For Rose, I decided to give her the spring uniform. This is something I'll do often when drawing gym and gym characters, which is to switch up the uniforms, but I just thought that this look suited her more. Now, you probably already noticed it at this point, but I'm drawing everyone with the same off-white skin tone. This is because the gems in this show don't actually have skin, but what they just wear like a white powder, which I believe protects them from the sun, and also they wear it too so that they look more like their sensei. But underneath the powder is just more gems, more sparkle, more wow. And you can see this when they break or crack. Now, because of this, though, I won't be able to add things like Rosa's moles, Chase's vitiligo, or Nyx's eye bags and piercings. So it is sad that I won't be able to draw any of that. But I hope that with the knowledge that they don't actually have skin, that it'll be okay, I guess. I don't know. Now, Rose Quartz has a hardness of 8, which is pretty high, and knowing Rose, more than likely she's going to be a scout that would fight Lunarians. I would imagine that Rose is actually slightly taller than most of the gems, and with her strength, she gets a thicker sword, sort of like Antarcite's sword. I don't even know if I'm saying that word right. Antarcite. I think it's Antarcite, I think. Sorry, I never know how to say that name right. I love them, but I can't say their name right. Like I said, Rose gets the spring uniform instead of the fall one. And yeah, Rose would probably get along with most of the gems there and not have too many internalized problems, at least for now. We'll see what would happen in the future of the show, though. Aventurine was really interesting as far as thinking how she would fit in the story. So Aventurine is canonically deaf and the youngest of the group, so I thought it would be fun to translate that here by making her the smallest of all the gems, and if possible, have her still be deaf due to either the microorganisms that live in the gems having some like they're just not there in the ear area, or they're just like not working properly in the ear area like the others. I don't know if that's even possible, if the gems can have disabilities, but if so, that's what we'll go with. Aventurines are also at a level 8, but because of her disability and how the gyms kind of view things like disabilities as weaker and bad, as shown with foes being the smallest. Also, she would also be really small. I would imagine she would have a different job, like sorting papers or something, hence the papers she's holding. I would also imagine that she feels pretty left out like Foes does, but instead of showing it through, like almost complaining in a way, she would probably internalize it, even though Foes also does that. But she might be a surprisingly good fighter though. Now for the boys, since they aren't gym wielders, I had to choose separate gyms for them. For Nick, I went with Alexandrite. The reason why is for a reason that's pretty important to his canon story, but I won't bring it up. Of course, there is another Alexandrite in the show, so for his hair color, I went with the more green color instead of the light blue that Lexi has, and I also associate the gym more with the color green anyway, so yeah. But I also decided to add in the hair transitioning to red, using the same technique in the show by having the purple in the middle, and I believe I did something similar to his eyes. I did that just because it looked cool and it was really fun to do. As far as in the story, Nick would obviously be older than the rest of the group and probably be a scientist type like Rutile. However, instead of Lexi turning red when looking at a Lunarian, he would turn red when the moon is out. So he might actually do daytime patrol during the day and then do his science stuff at night, since he probably can't sleep that well in red form. This definitely means that he is chronically tired, and I can only imagine the annoyance of all of that during the winter, but maybe it's only when the moon is visible or something, I'm not sure. Lastly, for Chase, I went with Citrine. Chase probably did daytime patrol, but stopped after losing his partner, and so works on making weapons like Obsidian does. Nick would probably be his partner when he's required to do patrol, but he's not the best fighter, which might be a part of the reason their old partner was taken, or at least that's what he thinks. The rule in Moonstone is that when gym wielders transform and their hair and eyes change color, 9 out of 10 their hair also grows longer. So for both Chase and Nick, it was fun experimenting with what their hair would look like if they were transformed. But I really like how Chase's hair looks here, even though I'm not as far as like Nick's hair styling goes, I'm not the best. I don't like it that much because his ponytail is just longer, not the rest of his hair, but that's okay. And that was all of my characters as Land of the Lustrous gyms, which I've wanted to do forever. So the next show I decided to put them in was Puella Magi Madoka Magica, another show I've talked about a lot here and I won't stop talking about, and the topic of the very first video I made. However, the way that the rules of the magic system works, I couldn't really find a way to include Nick and Chase. The magic system is that this creature called E.V.A will choose a girl around her preteen years, most of the time, and ask them if they want to make a contract with him, which will grant them any wish, and in exchange they get a soul gem, which turns them into a magical girl, and they have to fight witches. And E.V.A is always specific that he only chooses girls. Now, I can make this work with River because E.V.A never specifies whether the person needs to be cisgendered, and if they were born female at birth and identify as a girl, or if the sex at birth doesn't matter and they just need to identify as a girl. In this case, we're going to assume the second is true so that we can include River, who is gender fluid, so they do identify as a girl sometimes. I would imagine that maybe E.V.A came up to them on a day that they were feeling more like a girl and was like, "Hey, you're a girl, right? Would you like to be a magical one?" I would imagine that these can cause complicated issues when they're not feeling like a girl, because everyone just calls everyone magical girls, and sometimes they're not girls, sometimes they're guys, sometimes they're non-binary, but that would be interesting for the story. However, wasn't going to work with Nick and Chase. Chase is obvious, he's a guy, cis guy, it really wasn't a workaround with that one. And Nick Way 1 is way too old at this point. He's in his late 30s, early 40s. Even when he was younger, he's transgender, which I've talked about. And when he was about the same age as the others, he didn't quite know this yet. And he still tried to think he was a girl. But if we're assuming the rules of this world works, like I said, then I would like to think that E.V.A somehow knows that Nick is not a girl and will never be one. So he would leave him alone, hopefully. With that out of the way, I can talk about the designs, which turn out to be some of my favorites. The Madoka designs don't have clear rules like the other ones, but I was able to notice some patterns by looking at both the Holy Quintet and the group from Magia record. These were that they all wear a skirt of some kind, which is pretty obvious. Most wear high heels. They all have some sort of bow accessories that they wear on their clothes, which I actually forgot to include on the others, but that's okay, which actually differ in style, some sort of hair accessory or head accessory, and if they are in a team, they have a common color. This one might not seem as obvious, but it's something I saw when looking at the girls. The Holy Quintet all seem to have some black or really dark color on them. The only exception being Magica, but that makes sense. And the gang from Magia record all have some gold or yellow accent in their design. That might be me reading too deep into it, but I think there is something there. And then of course, there are the normal rules like giving them a soul gem and having their outfits match with the color of their soul gem and potentially having a theme with their soul gem as well, or whatever wish they made. That's not a hard and cut rule though, it's just something that is often seen. So yeah, River was the hardest for me to decide what their wish would be, but I decided to go with that they would wish about something to do with their band, whether it was to make it more successful or that they would be able to do it forever or something like that. Whatever it is, this would lead to River getting a music theme for their design, and that was super fun to draw. I looked up some refs from the 80s for rock and punk looks and tried to merge that with the Madoka aesthetic. For some reason, I really like the idea of a rock-type magical fighter, and I did cheat my own rule a bit and gave them a see-through skirt with some shorts, so that way they don't have to be stuck with something to be too frilly if they're feeling more masculine or androgynous or something of that sort. Their weapon was super fun to design as well. Since they are the guitarists of the group, I knew that they would need their guitar, and since I was already adding more moon imagery in their theme, I made it into the shape of a moon. As a weapon, this would probably be act like an axe, and they might also be able to do something with the strings, though I imagine their main power would probably be to be able to play the guitar in order to boost someone's strength or magic. Other moon stuff I added were the hairpins and their soul gem, and at this point I can already hear you. Yes, I'm aware that with the short blue hair, the way the hairpins are placed, and their music theme, that they could just be a rock version of Sayaka, but that's not what we're doing, so it's fine. But anyway, their soul gem is placed on their chest, and I almost forgot to say that the common color of these guys is pink, so I added that in as well. Rosa's was interesting because in the context of her main story, she more than likely would simply wish to be a magical girl, but I decided to add some more to that and change that up for this universe. So I imagined that Rosa was probably friends with some magical girls, but one day they disappeared, probably dying in a witch labyrinth or potentially becoming witches themselves. And Rosa already knew about witches, so she would wish to become the new protector of the city that they lived in. Since the wish would specifically be about the city, I gave her a more cyberpunk design, but still have elements of classic magical girl. Instead of a more knight appearance, I also gave her a more nimble night fighter, or not nimble night fighter, but a nimble fighter look, since she would need to move quickly to fight all the witches. In this version of the story as well, Rosa would probably be the senior magical girl and was how River and Gia found out about them. So her personality would probably be a bit different, maybe a bit more serious about her work. But she would still have that Rosa that we all know deep down and still be able to be friendly with the others. Unfortunately, I didn't put too much thought into the weapons that I gave her, so I don't have much to say other than I loosely based them off of her cannon sword and gave her 2 of them. Since her eyes are purple, she gets a primarily purple palette rather than pink, which I think furthers the idea that this version of Rosa would actually be quite a bit different. Her soul had to be a flower, though, her soul gem, and I went with a pretty ornate one with the gold around it, which may or may not be inspired by Mommy's flower soul gem as well. And since there wasn't really any other flower imagery in this design, I decided to give her a little flower in the center of her long ribbon hair. For Gia, I already knew what I wanted her wish to be. Like I've said, she's really into fairies, and some fairies can grant wishes and stuff, so she would already know about that concept. When she meets E.V.A, she kind of sees him as a fairy and really loves the idea of granting wishes and making other people happy. So she wishes that she could do what E.V.A does and grant any wish that people make, but not for anything in exchange. Now, this is a pretty powerful wish, so I'd imagine that she becomes really strong from this. But it's also a wish that sounds good on paper, but comes with loads of problems and even more problems in this universe. If you've seen the show, you probably know what would happen to this poor child, and you're probably mad at me right now for that. But you know, I'm gonna do worse to these characters. Not to Jia. Jia's fine. It's just in this universe that she's suffering a bit. So for her design, I tried to give as many E.V.A elements that I could. Those mainly being her dress with a hood that has the E.V.A ears, and her hair comes out of it like his ears. To make the design make sense, I also decided to go ahead and give her the longer hair she gets in her canon transformation. But instead of green, it's black that fades to pink. 3 little white dots. I also added in imagery of fairies and also genies in her design because wishes, like the bracelets, chain design, and the little skirt detail. At first I thought her weapon was cool, which is a bow that can shoot arrows that look like shooting stars, until I realized that's basically what Monica's weapon is. But that's fine. Overall, I really liked her design. The only thing bugging me was her colors. Now, her eyes and soul gems are green, so normally that would mean I would choose green colors. The color rule is something that gets broken in the magica game, and I thought it would be fun, and I do like the pink, but I was just really curious how it would look with the primarily green palette, so I quickly made a separate version. Let me know which one you prefer. Also, if you're wondering why I placed her soul gem on her ankle, it was supposed to allude to the lucky rabbit's foot thing, but I think I should have placed it on the center of her hoodie. That's okay. It's also a star as well. And those were the Madoka designs, another one of my favorite shows down. Now, for the last one, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. At first, I thought maybe designing them into the My Hero Academia show because superheroes, but the thing is almost all the heroes help design their looks just like in Moonstone. And I don't know if their quirks would be much different either. I also haven't seen the whole show. I haven't even finished season 2, so I don't think that would work. I had then thought about Genshin Impact. I made plenty of Genshin designs before, and it would be fun to decide what their visions would be and where they would live. However, the problem with that is I knew those designs would be super complicated because that's just, if you want to make a Genshin design, you gotta make it complicated and take a long time to draw, and I didn't have the energy for that. So I was stuck thinking, and then I thought, what was the other thing that inspired me to start working on this story? A movie that I love so dearly and at the time was getting a sequel soon. That's right, it seemed so obvious that I had to design the gang's spider sonas as if they were from Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. This movie is my favorite movie ever. I watched it in theaters when it first came out, and no joke, I think it changed my life, but I'll probably go over that at a later date. And just when I was thinking this, the sequel was finally released, which I also watched in theaters, and it was fantastic. So now I think it's high time that everyone got their own spider sonas. For these guys, I wanted each of them to be loosely based on a real-life spider to give them a little more flair. However, I didn't really look up anything extra about the spiders other than what I already know because, fun fact about me, I have severe arachnophobia. Yeah, it's true. Me, the person whose favorite superhero is Spider-Man and whose favorite movies are the Spider-Verse ones, is very afraid of spiders. I don't know either. It's just pure irony. I don't know. But the point is their visual design and some of their powers are going to be based on this concept. This time we're starting off with Nick. The reason why is because of some of the story ideas I thought of. In this version of Spider-Man story, Nick and River come from the same universe, but the others come from different ones. And the way that Nick and River both became spider heroes in one universe is that Nick was actually a scientist working directly with these spiders and developing their radioactivity. One day though, 3 of these spiders got out. and one bit Nick almost right away. One found its way to River and bit them, and the other one probably bit someone who would become a villain for these two. Ooh, little spice there. Nick's transformation was pretty awful, being pretty painful and slow, since he got bit by the equivalent of a Black Widow, while River's was more like the normal transformation that we've seen. Much like in their canon story, Nick would feel awful about what he did and letting the spiders escape, so this leads to him reaching out to River and eventually leading to them becoming their own spider duo and helping the city, although in different ways. I imagine Nick would be more like a Batman type hero, more of a darker vigilante, so I made his design darker and was surprisingly inspired by Spider-Man Noir for like the long coat and stuff. I stuck mainly with black and red for his colors, and also this dark red color for his coat. I also gave him that Black Widow symbol on his coat as well, and also his coattails are sharper to allude to spider fangs, of course. For his powers, alongside the normal ones, I would imagine that he can use his blood, which would be really poisonous, and make weapons that can eject the poison into villains. He would need to be careful about not using too much blood, but knowing him, he probably wouldn't be, and this would cause a lot of problems. I also decided to only give him a mask that covers his nose and mouth as a callback to Moon's canon design. For River, I decided to base them off of a jumping spider, since one of their canon powers is that gravity affects them less, causing them to jump higher and run faster. I ended up liking their design the most out of this group and based them more on their casual design, their main casual design. I gave them a sleeveless suit look with some long gloves and boots that I wanted to look bigger at the ends to look like the fuzzier, bigger legs of the jumping spider, if I'm remembering that correctly. I gave them 6 eyes on their masks, since jumping spiders have those huge eyes, and having multiple eyes would could actually be one of their powers. I also gave them a see-through shirt thing for style, and I'm now realizing that almost all of River's designs has had some sheer clothing aspect. I can't escape it. Finally, I went with the colors from their transformed hair rather than their normal ones. Maybe this would have happened as a result of the bite, or maybe they just dyed it differently. We don't know. It's a different universe. Who knows? Now for Chase, who would be from a different universe. They would probably meet when they join the Spider Society, which was a concept introduced in Across the Spider-Verse if you haven't watched it yet, which I won't spoil it here, even though it's been out for months. I imagine that when they meet, Chase was someone that Nick knew from his universe, but something happened, maybe he died, so it might affect him seeing him as a spider person. Since Chase is super smart and techie, I imagine that when he got bit, he would become a much more techie Spider-Man. Those exist, so it might be like a whole genre of Spider-Man, and use his gadgets more to fight. I based his spider off of a daddy longleg, or I believe garage spider is its other name, which I'm totally not stealing from the main villain from my Mysteries of Hysteria comic. And no, I'm also not stealing his main power, which are the long appendages coming from the back. It's also definitely not something stolen from the MCU Peter's killing suit. Trust me, it's not. I do wish that I drew those to look more mechanical, but anyway, the rest of the suit is pretty standard for a Spider-Man suit, just with some shorts and the shoulder things for extra armor, and instead of a mask, he wears these goggles. Does this hide his face well? No, but he never fights close up anyway, so it's fine. I do really love how the dark and bright yellow look together, and I would imagine some cool official art with him that would have his goggles glowing in the dark. I think that would look cool. Also, Chase probably just has the normal Spider-Man powers, but his gadgets would almost act as if he had extra powers in a way. Rosa is next, and unlike the others, very much like she is canonically, she doesn't really care about hiding her identity, so right off the bat, she doesn't have a mask. The reason why is because she wouldn't really have much to protect, or a reason why she would live a double life, and Gia wouldn't even be in her universe, so when she got bit, she just started fighting crime without much care about that. I wanted her design to look more like a hand-fighting superhero rather than a magical girl, since Rosa also loves those. I also decided to design her suit off of her casual look, so she has a lot more blue with her pink. She also gets a see-through element, which doesn't really look like that, but that's just because in the line art I filled the inside in with the same color as the line art, but that's just because of that. I don't know, but I did make it look like a cape. And I also gave her these big gloves. We're really going with a more classic superhero look with her, but with a modern look as well. Her hair also gets a bright pink at the ends of her hair rather than the light pink bangs she usually has, but I think this was just hair dye. This is a different version of Rosa after all, so it's probably not obvious, but her spider would be based on a tarantula. And finally, her special power would be simple super strength, even though I think Spider-Man already has that, but it's a lot more super strength. I also imagine that her skin is a lot tougher than most. And finally, we have Jia. Now, I'm not sure why, but I also decided not to give Jia a mask. I'm almost 100% sure that I did this because I was really tired and just didn't want to design a mask, but it kind of works. She and Rosa are kind of matching. I don't know these decisions sometimes. I drew these months ago. I don't know what I was thinking. But she does get a hood, and unlike the others, she gets a suit designed more on her transformed look, so she gets a poncho thing like her shawl and these ribbons falling from it since her spider is a silk spider. I also gave her much shorter hair since it probably fits more with this version of Jia, and instead of black, it's green like her transformed look. She would probably be one of the youngest spider people, and she's also not really having a good time because she also hates spiders, but she hates that she has the powers of one, and she probably thinks it's really scary. She also doesn't really have anyone, family or friends, so she feels pretty lonely, but that might change when she meets the rest of the gang. The only other special power I decided to give her was extra spider sense, but minus the hearing part of it. Hers would probably be more sight-based, as well as just, sense based. I think that's what the spider senses. I don't think it's like extra hearing or sight. I think it's just sense. But hers would be much higher. It's also really interesting to think about how they would all react to being in the spider society with all of the multiverse. It's also fun to imagine how Nick and Miguel would interact. They're kind of similar in a way. They're even both Mexican, which is interesting, except Nick is way more chill and wouldn't beat up a child. Unlike Miguel. But that was all of them, and that was everything. It was finally it. All of these drawings took so long, and I did make them a while ago, if you couldn't tell. So if they look pretty different from my style now, that's the reason. But I really like how everyone's designs turned out and the stories I came up with them. Maybe I'll do this with my other characters and other things from their genre, like Haiku's Magical World, other like action stuff or like shonen-y stuff, Mysteries of Dysteria, maybe other stuff that involves animal-like people. I don't know. Let me know what you think, and let me know what you think of these designs. And of course, you can follow me on Instagram for more artwork like this, and also read my comics, Haiku's Magical World and Mysteries of Dysteria, like I just mentioned. And you can do all that in the description link below. I also have Lost Hearts, my completed comic, link below. And if you wanted to watch the video where I talked about these guys for the first time, not the first time, but the second time from their canon story, you can check that video out as well. And with that, I know this video was really long, but I'll let you guys go, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.